Thank you, Scott. I definitely appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Friday. I'm glad you're here with me today on this specific day where we're going to talk about MFA or multi-factor authentication. Now, the format here, it's meant to be somewhat of a fireside chat, discussion-based type of environment. I have the slides to help us guide through some discussions. However, if possible, I would like for you to come off mute, ask questions, or you can pop things in the chat, and that would be great. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll jump into the first couple of things around MFA. So my name is Romeo Gardner. I am the cybersecurity trainer here for FCPS. So what does that actually mean? Anything related to cybersecurity and training, I will be putting out content around that. That could be videos, that could be things within a portal or the hub on how you would do things related to MFA, or how you could encrypt your email, which we do have some new things coming out soon, so you're going to see that as well. My background served as the vulnerability analyst or vulnerability management, which means I just looked at a bunch of vulnerabilities and threats to the White House, the Secret Service, their staff, during the George Bush Jr. era and Obama era. And I'm a former Microsoft engineer. So I stayed at Microsoft for roughly about 9 years, and also taught there as well and created some content for their training. Expertise is in cybersecurity training and just cybersecurity in general. Still do a little bit of technical work, but I love teaching. I love doing things like this. So this is exciting for me. Let's get to it. So we're out of the Office of Cybersecurity. We help to protect digital information and the privacy of not only staff, but students as well across the enterprise. That is what our office actually does. That's what we do on a daily basis. Now, I'm covering a couple of things that are related to cybersecurity, just so we can kind of set the stage. Cybersecurity principles. If you were to go anywhere, and I do mean anywhere, and read anything about cybersecurity, they're going to focus on 3 things. Those 3 things are what they call the CIA triad. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Let me ask you a question. When you think about confidentiality and data, or confidentiality and information, what do you think about? How could you put those 2 together? What does that mean? You can type it in the chat, or you can come off mute. Confidentiality. Confidentiality, what does that mean to you around cybersecurity? Okay. I'll take a stab at it. See something in the chat there. Data secure, keeping things, yeah, absolutely, Pamela. Keeping things private, privacy of my information, 100%. Love that, love that. So you're absolutely right. Keeping things private, the privacy of that information, not sharing sensitive data, all of those things are related to confidentiality. And we're going to tie that into MFA as well. All of those things, this is perfect, Marcel. All of those things are related to confidentiality. That's exactly it. Preventing the unauthorized disclosure of critical information. We're trying to keep that information between who it's supposed to remain with. So if you share it with somebody, it's kind of like if you decided to share a secret with someone, we want to have that secret remain just between you and the person you shared it. That would be our confidentiality. Now, from an integrity perspective, integrity, typically when we think about integrity, we always talk about, well, does that person have integrity? Are they doing the right thing when no one's looking? We talk to our students about that. We talk to our staff about that. Well, integrity from this perspective means, is the data unaltered? Can I trust this data? So we're hoping that this data that we're viewing has not fallen into hands of a hacker, a bad actor, or somebody who has manipulated that data to make us think otherwise. So that's what we mean in terms of integrity. And availability is just what you probably think it is. It is the data actually available? Can you get to it? So what attackers like to do is, you know what? If I'm not able to get into this system, guess what? You won't either. I'll just make it unavailable for you. That is not something that we want to have happen. So these are the three basic things that we focus on within the cybersecurity realm in terms of principles, right? So that's going to be confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So I just wanted to set the stage there. Education. It is one of the most targeted industries. I mean, the most targeted industry in the world. So this happens, malware is lobbed at the education arena, specifically us. In the past 30 days, probably you're looking at 3 to 5 million times. 3 to 5 million. Why do you think we are such a great target? Why do you think we're a big target? You can type it in the chat or you can come off mute. Why do you think we're a target? Or such a lucrative target, really? Why do you think education is such a appealing target for malware or viruses or ransomware, anything like that? Because kids and they may be easily manipulated and tricked. Size and financial backing. Absolutely. Parents will protect their kids at any cost. Absolutely. These are great answers. Really good answers. And they're all correct. The just sheer size of FCPS, identity theft, budgeted money and targets. You're absolutely right, David. So we have budgets, we have larger budgets, and we know that we have to protect these students. Parents are going to protect their kids, right? The other pieces around why we're so targeted, it's like a spider web. So as an attacker, if I was able to possibly breach Scott's account, political ransom. Oh, that's a good one, David. If I was able to breach Scott's account at FCPS, I wouldn't stop there. That would branch out to his personal life. Now I'm trying to figure out personally, who does he deal with? If I can compromise his email account, then you know what I might do? I might send an email to Susan saying, hey, this is Scott. I have this link I want you to click on at FCPS. It's a new training that we're coming out with. Can you click on it, put your information in? Then I try to compromise Susan's account and send that to David, from David to Marisol. That's why I said it is a spider web that they try to look at from an education perspective. And it's not just staff. Then they're going to branch out to parents and try to grab parents and their personal information. So it's a big lucrative target, as well as some political ransom as well. These are great answers. Great answers. Thank you so much. Now, we're kind of setting the stage here for multi-factor authentication. Kind of setting the stage. But we got to talk about something. Passwords. Passwords. Now, passwords are, they're like, I have a thing against passwords because we have so many, right? And I mean a lot. And I'm not just talking about FCPS, I mean in our entire life. So I want you to take a second. I want you to take a second and think about the top 5 things that you might log into. Top 5 things you might log into. That could be your work email, your personal email, your banking account, maybe your child's information, maybe an account for, let's say, Walmart or Target or Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or all these streaming services. The top 5 accounts that you log into. Give you a moment to think about that. Now I want you to think about, do they all have the same password? I don't need you to tell me. I'm not going to ask you to put that in the chat. That I'm not going to ask you to do. But I want to bring awareness to if they do have the same password. So what do you believe the danger in using the same password could be if an attacker was to get a hold of your password? What do you think could happen? What do you think could happen? You can come off mute or you can put it in the chat. What would be the danger or ramifications or maybe an effect of using the same password for everything? They would have access to everything. You would be robbed. Yeah. Yeah, those are two main things, right? So if an attacker was to get a hold of maybe one account with that password, then they could potentially compromise every other account that you have. And it's difficult, right? It's difficult because I just talked about 5 accounts. That's just the top 5. I'm pretty sure you have more than 5 accounts. I looked at some things that I log into on a regular, and that was around 15. 15. How can you keep track of all of these passwords? That is the issue, right? So I would recommend a password manager. Google has a password manager. If you wanted to pay for one, I'm not recommending that you go to a specific one. I'm just throwing some out there, right? Google has one. LastPass has one. OnePass has one. NordPass has. These are all password managers, and these password managers can generate passwords for you, so that you don't have to remember the passwords. You only have one password to remember. That is your key password to get into the password manager. That would aid you in having to stop remembering all these passwords, or what we typically tend to do. Hey, I'm guilty of this. What we typically do is we have one good password, right? That one password is great. And then we have to change it after 90 days or 60 days or something like that. And then we change it and put a 1 on the end, and then maybe a 2 or 3. So we just keep going until it turns to a complete circle and we're back at 1 again. So this can generate passwords for you so you don't have to remember it. Thinking about how secure your password is at this particular time, there's something called a brute force. A brute force would take a application, it'd use a password cracker, and that would look at your password, and the top password could be brute forced or cracked in about 1 minute. 8 characters, not too long. I think about a minute to do. The next one, you're looking at maybe 9, 10 characters. That would take probably about an hour to complete. Typically, what we would like for you to do is, if you're going to create your own password, use a passphrase. A passphrase could be 15 to 20 characters. I know that sounds like a lot, right? I know that sounds like a lot, but think about a song, a lyric to a song, or something from a movie, a phrase that you say on a regular basis, things like that. That can help you remember it. In addition to that, it would take much longer to crack or brute force a passphrase. So just a bit of help there in terms of thinking about your password. Now, before I move on, can I answer any questions about passwords? Any questions about the education arena? See something in the chat. Is a password manager secure? That is a very good question. It is secure. It is secure, but it's only as secure as you keeping the password. So that password that you need to use to get into the password manager, if you write that down or you have that out for everybody, that could be an issue. That would be an issue. David said, wouldn't it be better for the password generators to create passphrases? Yes, you're absolutely right. That's why I did mention it. You can use those. They can create a passphrase or just a password for you. That way you don't have to remember it. You can save that. But if you must create your own password, I would definitely go with the passphrase. So another question, why is a passphrase so much harder? That's a really good question. So to crack a password or brute force it, we're looking at characters. So the passphrase is going to go through, in order to crack a password or to brute force a password, you have to go through millions of calculations to determine what this password could be to find the right one. The shorter the length, the faster it can go. Now, these computers, we don't have the quantum supercomputers yet. So they're in certain places, but we don't have them readily available to everybody. But 8 characters, that can be done pretty quickly. If you have 15 to 20 characters, the sheer amount of passwords that it could be is going to take much longer to really figure out, because there's so many characters that it could be versus 8, there's a finite. And generally, they have, so there's a table that shows like regular passwords that they can crack very quickly. So if you use the word password as a password, or pass123 or anything like that, they already have that readily available, so they can crack those passwords very fast. Very fast. So that's why a passphrase is so much harder to crack, because of the sheer amount of characters within the passphrase. I hope that helped to provide a bit of context to that. Great, great, great. Any other questions I can answer before we kind of move on? These are great questions, by the way. Really thoughtful questions too. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Eric.
And maybe you're going to go into this, but when you have, let's say, an easy password and you add a biometric measure to it, like your fingerprint, and again, you might go into this later, I don't know, but will that make a difference as far as how simple the password can be when you add a bio to it?
Is actually that is leading into multi-factor authentication. So that's right up. It is the next thing that we are going to cover. So I will include that right now. I'll include that right now. So I'm going to move to the next slide. Multi-factor authentication. This is why we are here, right? I wanted to set the stage for all of this. When we talk about multi-factor authentication, it's the type of authentication method that would require 2 verification factors. So Eric just asked that question around, hey, if you have a simple password, but then you have something that's biometric to verify you as well, is that going to be harder for somebody to crack? Would that be, what would that do? It's a really thoughtful question. And when we look at multi-factor authentication, so if you have a simple password, like if you just had password, right? Password was your actual password to get into your account. 1, I would not suggest that. 2, if you have multi-factor authentication enabled, when you type that password or anybody else types that password, you're going to be notified that someone is attempting to log into your account. So that is the second line of defense. That's the second line of defense. It's very similar to, think about if we had a house. If we have a house and in front of our house, we have a fence. We have a fence that somebody has to get through to get to the house. And then right behind that fence, we have a dog. We have a dog there. We have a pit bull. Doberman. They all get along. We have a few dogs there. So the fence would be the first line of defense, right? That would be like your password. The dogs would be your second line of defense. That is exactly what would happen. So you could technically use that password because you're going to get notified if somebody attempts to log into your account. I just wouldn't suggest it, Eric. But that's a really good question. Multi-factor is based off of three things. It's based off of three things. One, something you know, something you are, or something you have. So these are in their own right. You could be authenticated or you could log in with any one of these things. Something you know. I know my username and I know my password. I could log in that way. Something you are. You could use a fingerprint or facial recognition. So for Windows Hello, you could use facial recognition. Those who have a iPhone, you could use facial recognition to log in. Lastly, something that you have. It could be a badge that you could use to log in, or it could be a smartphone that you could use to log in. Type in something that you know on your smartphone, the PIN number. The multi-factor piece comes in when you combine two of those things together. So now I have to have the username and password. That is something that I know, and I need to have my smartphone that may have a authenticator app on it to complete the authentication or the login. That is really where we want to go at FCPS. Not just at FCPS, I would really suggest that you all use this within your own personal life. And why am I saying use that for your personal life as well at FCPS? Well, I have an email account. I'll give you a funny story. I have an email account. It is romeo@outlook.com. I mean, I have my own name. Like, it is romeo@outlook.com. And tons of people try to log into that account all the time. I am notified when somebody attempts to log into that account. That is what we're trying to get at. So, Eric, if you have an account, a personal account, and someone's trying to log into your personal account, you want to be notified by multi-factor authentication or that authenticator app that someone is attempting to log into your account. At that point, you could at least say, okay, I see somebody's trying to log into my account. Maybe later on, I might change my password or something like that, or I might just do nothing. But at least I know if somebody's trying to get into my account. That's why we're focusing on multi-factor authentication for FCPS and for your life personal accounts. Can I answer any questions around multi-factor authentication on that front? Take a drink of water. No questions so far. So I do see one. How do you set up for personal accounts? Good question. Good question. So for personal accounts, for a Gmail or for an Outlook account or a Live account or any email account, you would go into your settings and there is an option that says enable MFA. Now, when you're going to enable MFA, that would be based on if you want to use a Microsoft Authenticator or a Google Authenticator application. Two different applications. I tend to lean towards Google Authenticator. Yep, you can use Google Authenticator app for your personal accounts as well. Thank you so much. I tend to use the Google Authenticator account. I like that a little bit better. The Google Authenticator meaning, hey, when I attempt to log into either my personal account or an account at FCPS, I'm going to be prompted to go to my app and then enter in these 6 numbers. You'll enter in those 6 numbers and then you'll be authenticated. Eric said, can you set up MFA on more than one phone for FCPS? Personal and FCPS phones. You could set up MFA on more than one phone for FCPS. Although I probably wouldn't do it, but you could do it. I would probably try to keep them, all on one specific phone. So it's a really good question, Eric, leading into the next portion, right? Or the next question. If you have this authenticator app, like you have multi-factor authentication, this specific authenticator app on your personal phone, would that make it subject to a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request? No, it would not, because you're not storing any data there. There's no data stored in that space. You're not storing any data there. The only thing you're doing is getting a code so you could actually log into an account. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. In addition to that, that authenticator app it does not take a lot of space up. In terms of how your phone operates, it is not going to impact the efficiency of your phone or anything like that. The only thing it's doing is generating random numbers so that if somebody was to get your phone or try to, they'd have maybe 60 seconds or 30 seconds to try to put in these numbers, but they'd have to have your phone in order to do that. And he said, thanks for all the great info. Is there any easier way to transfer MFA app settings when you get a new phone? Oh my goodness. That is the question. So I've done this probably like 2 or 3 times. And one time recently, I can tell you from a Microsoft perspective, transferring MFA to a new phone, it's very difficult, like extremely difficult, because you have to set everything up again. This is why I go with Google Authenticator. If you have a Google Authenticator, it is almost seamless. You can transfer, so if you have, let's say you have 6 accounts that you have in your Google Authenticator, professional, FCPS, and personal, you can transfer all of those over to the new phone at one time. Versus with Microsoft, they make you do it one at a time. Like you literally have to, there you go, David, export a QR code, boom. Microsoft, you literally have to go one by one by one. And that's when I knew that's not the one for me. that's when I knew it's not the one for me. And I just stuck with Google Authenticator, because you can just export all of them at the same time. So great question there though, Amy. Any other questions I can answer before we move on to the next slide here for discussion around that? How do I access the recording? Pamela, this will be in the, I think Scott said this will be in the hour of learning.
Yep, this recording and other recordings from the DIT Hour of Learning will be in the YouTube playlist, probably published at some point next week.
Awesome. Pamela, I'm sorry that your power is out. I'm really sorry about that, because I know how I feel when my power goes out. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I surviving right now? I'm so spoiled. So I'm sorry about that. Hopefully your power comes back on very soon. For FC, yeah, the kids at home too. Oh goodness, I'm sorry. So for MFA, I would also be enabling that for all 3 accounts, for all 3 of your FCPS accounts. That is your Microsoft account, your Google FCPS account, and single sign-on. That would be around my time and things like that as well. Is FCPS recommending Google over Microsoft Authenticator? From an FCPS perspective, there isn't necessarily a recommendation that you should go with either one of them. It's just Microsoft over Google or Google over Microsoft. It's totally up to you. it really is totally up to you. I mean, there's personal preference. Some folks like to go with Microsoft because they're familiar with Microsoft and the things that they do. I can tell you how each one works, right? Here's what I'm gonna do, Susan. I'm gonna tell you how each one works, and then from there, you can really take an opinion on what might be better for you. Susan, okay, I had to move from Google because of a technical glitch with it for my FCPS apps. Gotcha. So you're familiar with how Google works, right? You would go to the Authenticator app, take a look, and see certain 6 numbers that you need to type in a certain amount of time. Microsoft, their Authenticator app, it works one of 2 ways. And I haven't figured out the algorithm yet. On one hand, you're going to take a look at the 6 numbers, and you'll have to type that within a certain amount of time. On the other hand, you might not get those numbers. What will happen is a number will be prescribed to you that will be sent to you. Let's say that number is 17. It's going to direct you to your Microsoft Authenticator app, and then it'll give you an option. There'll be like 17, 42, 15, 20. You have to select the correct number. So there are 2 ways that Microsoft actually has an authenticator. I tend to go with just the Google Authenticator, only to use that piece because I just want to type in the numbers. David said Duo MFA for remote access users. He has 4 accounts for FCPS. Duo has the same type of thing as well. Yep. That's great info. Great info. How would you set this up from an FCPS perspective? There's a portal here that I have that we could take a look at. And I believe that Marisol also put that in the chat as well. She put that in the chat as well. Awesome. Thank you so much, Marisol. If you were taking a look at the Authenticator app for all 3, this is what it would look like on the right-hand side. So you have your Fairfax County, you have your Google, and then you have your single sign-on there. So we're talking about multi-factor authentication, protecting your accounts, all of these things. We haven't told you why it's so important to do that, though. We could have mentioned, hey, we're trying to protect you. We're trying to protect your personal life, as well as parents and students, staff. But why and what would happen if we didn't do these types of things? What would happen? The ramifications of not doing this. So there is a website called Have I Been Pwned or Owned, basically, meaning has your email been in any type of breach? I'm going to go to this website and I'm going to type in my email address, and it'll give you the opportunity to see. You can do this on your own, or you can do this now. What you're going to see is if your email has been in a data breach, not if your email has been breached, right? 2 different things. So this is going to show me if my email had been caught up in a data breach somewhere. This does not tell me that someone has actually breached my email account. So what I'm going to do is let's take a look at here. And remember earlier, I said that my email address was romeo@outlook.com. Let's take a look. So I'm going to type this in here. And sure enough, my email was in 12 data breaches. 12 data breaches. 12. Anime games, Apex SMS, Canva. That's a big one for me because I use Canva, right? So I use Canva. They had a data breach that impacted 137 million subscribers. 137 million. That stuff. Collection 1. MyFitnessPal. You see all these different ones there. And I know for sure MyFitnessPal is a big one because for a minute, you know, hey, I'm just trying to get my summer body. I'm tracking what I'm eating and all this other stuff. Sure, I use that all the time. And it even shows what was in the data breach. It shows what was in the data breach. Does FCPS run its email addresses to a site like this to check for breaches? So we do something else. We look on the dark web for anything around our staff or email addresses that are for sale. The dark web is, there's sites that are not necessarily indexed. So you index so that you could get to them from just a regular browser. So if you used Chrome and tried to get to some piece of the dark web, you wouldn't be able to go there. You'd have to have a specific browser to get there. I would not suggest you go there because that is where a lot of illegal activity goes on. Antivirus, not antivirus, but viruses, malware, all those things live in that space. So we do look for certain types of things with that. Yes. So we look for FCPS information being sold on the dark web. That's a good question too. This shows, right, the compromised data that was caught up in the breach. Email addresses, IP addresses. Your IP address would be, hey, where your computer is being accessed from. Passwords and usernames. So all of that information was in the data breach. Twitter, before it was named X. 200 million, I didn't even see that, 200 million records. So that's names, social media profiles, usernames, email addresses. All of these things were caught up from my email address, right? All of them. So you might be thinking, so, okay, so let's say this actually happened to me. Or I was caught up in a data breach. What should I do? First thing you should be doing, changing your password, utilizing MFA. Changing your password, utilizing MFA. That is exactly why we are having this discussion now. You want to know if someone is attempting to log into your account. That's the whole purpose, right? Attempting to log into your account and adding some sort of secondary defense in depth. That is what we typically call it in the cybersecurity room, defense in depth. So if somebody happens to get past the first one, let's say they have your password, they're trying to log in as you, boom. Now I have this password, but I cannot get to this authenticator app because I don't have his or her phone. That's the second step there. Can I answer any questions around this portion? Any questions around this? If this says compromised data password, would our passwords be visible to them? That's a possibility. That's a possibility that your password could be available to them. Would they not be encrypted? Somebody, I see you out there. I see, that's a great follow-up question. Technical question. So, would they not be encrypted? Here we go, right? Here we go. They would be, and they should be, right? They would be and should be. If they're not, that's going to be a problem. Let's say they are. Let's say they are. Well, remember I talked about password crackers? Yes, I could use some sort of password cracker there. Even if it's encrypted, there's something called rainbow tables. These tables have all of the top passwords, what's called the hash from the password. So when passwords get encrypted, they turn into it's a different form of the password. It's a different form. It's called a hash. So you're scrambling the password and then taking this scramble, and that is actually what's seen. Well, there are the encrypted hashes of passwords already out there. So these tables have tons and tons of rows of encrypted hashes or hashes that are already out there of passwords. So it's possible that even though your password was encrypted, somebody already has the hash to it, and all they need to do is take that hash and use it. It's a very good question. Other questions that I can answer around this. You all are asking some really good questions. Let me think about this. So we went to Have I Been Pwned already? Let me jump back in slideshow. We talked about Have I Been Pwned already? There was a couple other things that I wanted to mention. Where did I want to go from here? So I wanted to actually show you it is the hacked beautiful. I usually have this. Oh, information beautiful. That's what it is. Sorry about that. I usually have this up, and I thought I had this up, but I wanted to show you the breaches around this. Also, we have two email addresses, one a username, the other is dotted name. So those email addresses should be like aliases to one another. An alias is it's going to direct the email to each one. So you could give the dotted, or you could give your regular one. They should be going to the same place, the exact same spot. So they're alias to one another. Speaking of aliases, we got a quick minute here before I show the data breaches. For your personal life, when we talk about email addresses, it's very rare that I actually give out my email address, my personal email address. I have an alias. An alias it's an email address that links to your real email address. And when you give it to someone, it will still get delivered to your personal inbox, but they won't know your real email address. You can set that up in Google, or you can set that up with Microsoft. In Google, it's very easy. It's very easy to give somebody a alias. In Google, you could potentially, let's say my email address is romeo@gmail.com. If I wanted to give somebody an alias, I could type Romeo plus Netflix@gmail.com, and it would get delivered to Romeo@gmail.com. That's what an alias does. It will not share your real email address to the person you're giving it to, but it will send it to your personal email address. So if you have some time, check out an email alias. That way you can really get away from giving anyone your true email address. So let's talk about what we're seeing here. The world's biggest data breaches and hacks. As we were looking at Have I Been Pwned before, let's take a look at all of the data out here. They've updated it. Usually they only have 2023. They just updated this not too long ago. So they have 2024 listed in here also. So I'm super excited about this. Look at all of the things that are out here. Alias, therefore they can't log into you since they don't know your actual email. Absolutely. Thanks, Todd. I appreciate that. So take a look at all of these different areas out here. I mean, there are tons of different companies here. And a lot of these companies we utilize in our personal lives, right? AT&T. This is 2024. records lost, sensitive data from 2019. MGM, this just happened not too long ago. They paid a ransom. I do know this because, funny story, one weekend I was supposed to go to Vegas, and my wife and I were supposed to travel there. My friend was trying to check into the hotel and text me and said, hey, they have a ransomware attack right now. I cannot get into my room. The card system was down. The casinos were down. That's when I said, you know what, we'll just divert to New Orleans and we won't be at the MGM this time. All these different areas, Facebook is probably on this list more than once, I am sure. You see Twitter here, Uber's here. I'm sure Microsoft's probably on this list a little bit more. SolarWinds had a big fallout in 2020. Capital One, Twitter's here again. It was up here as well. So that was one in 2024. Facebook again, Capital One again, Marriott again. You see the same types of companies that are coming up over and over. Oh, remember I said MyFitnessPal was in there? Yeah, me trying to get my beach body ended up in this. LinkedIn. So you see tons of different companies, and it's probably going to be more as the years grow. What I also like to do is take a look at, if we keep going all the way down to the bottom, not as many, but they just start ticking up as we go throughout the years. There's more and more that are being paid attention to these compromises. What we don't see, and before we kind of wrap up and follow up with any questions, what we don't really see, you see anything about the military, government? They happen, but that's not necessarily going to be reported here. It still happens, but they're not reporting this information here. So I did want to show you that because that visual speaks a lot in terms of data breaches, in terms of why you should be using MFA, not only in your personal life, but at FCPS as well, because that education space is a target. So we kind of talked about how to use MFA, the different types of MFA, whether that is a Google Authenticator or a Microsoft Authenticator. We also talked about some cybersecurity principles, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We talked about education being a target, right? Talked about education being a target. We also talked about passwords in general. So we went through a couple of things. I want to leave a little bit of time here so that if there are any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'm seeing some in the chat now, actually. If you've been using Gmail account for years, that is your name, what can you do to protect that? Start over? You don't necessarily have to start over. You don't have to start over. You could begin to use an alias. Let me see if I can. I'll try to direct you to an alias for Gmail, alias for Gmail address. So that's what I would suggest. If you've been using your specific name for your account, I would start using an alias so that you're not using whether that's first or last, right? Because generally when those email addresses came out, I know a lot of people went to first name, not last name. That's what a lot of folks did, right? And then we started to realize maybe this may not be the best thing to do. So an email alias for Gmail will probably be the best way to move forward with that. In addition to MFA. Good question, though. Good question. I know we kind of talked about, we had a comment around political ransom, ransomware, things like that, which I have a question for you. Tell me why the government couldn't find the hacker. because he ran somewhere. I'm sorry, I could not help it. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help that joke. I'm sorry. I had to put one in there. I had to put one in there. So, what other questions can I answer around MFA, around email accounts, around FCPS accounts, around protecting your personal, professional life? Because they start to kind of mend together, right? How do we protect students? How do we protect students? That is a good question. So for FCPS, we are really stewards of protecting students as well, right? And that spans to protecting their data, protecting their information, ensuring that we comply with FERPA. All of these things go into protecting our students, ensuring that they can't get to certain sites because the students want to get around the things that we're implementing. You may have seen them passing around different proxies or trying to go through a proxy meaning, hey, I want to go to this specific site that will allow me to go to sites that I'm not supposed to go to at FCPS. So it's not that we're just trying to limit them from going to different sites, but some of those sites could potentially cause harm to the student or potentially cause harm to an FCPS device or both. So in protecting those students, if you see things like that, being able to report that so we can assist those students in protecting themselves and just protecting their information. It's a good question, though. Your child has their own iPhone at school. Yeah, so does mine, right? So does mine. Personally, I limit where and what my child can see. In addition to that, there's a family center in terms of social media. I'm not sure how old your child is, but there's a family center in any type of social media. Okay, 15, yeah. That's right at that age. There's a family center in social media, whether that is Snapchat or Instagram. They have a family center where you can actually monitor things that they're doing. There's also a security report. You do have to enable it on the iPhone, but there is a security report that talks about the sites that they have visited, how long they visited there, and what those sites did when the child or the person was visiting it. I would say check out the security report as well, even for yourself. It's entertaining just to see how much data that your phone is gathering from you. In addition to, it tells you how long you were there on a specific site and what that site was capturing. So I know we're right at 5 till. Any other questions that I can answer about this?
This was great. Thank you so much, Romeo. Just a few housekeeping items. We talked a little bit about the DIT Hour of Learning playlist. I'm going to drop that link in the chat, and then a session survey. We do this for all of our DIT Hour of Learning survey or sessions. Just if you could give us feedback on today, please feel free. If you guys have any follow-up questions, Romeo's super responsive and helpful. So if you guys wanted to reach out to him, or you could reach out to me about the session today. So thank you again, Romeo. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording the session.